In this video, I'm going to share the secret to better lesson objectives. But before we start, let's talk about why your current ones are rubbish.
Oh no, you didn't. I didn't say that. Yes, you did.
Hi everyone, if you're new here, welcome. On this channel, we aim to level up teaching, so it's easier, quicker and more fun for you. Now your students have already figured out in the first couple of minutes whether they're going to give your session their attention. It doesn't matter how long you've spent working on your slides, it doesn't matter whether you've dressed nicely and turned up early, sometimes it doesn't even matter whether you've bought donuts or not. It happens in that first second, when you move to your first slide and then all of your students have checked out. Now to understand why, I need you to go way back. Back to when you were at university. You ready? So I want you to remember that you're back at medical school. It's your first lecture of the day, you're kind of feeling a bit fresh-faced, it's not been that bad a day the night before, and the lecturer comes out to the front and says, by the end of this presentation, you'll be able to appreciate the heart sounds.
Boring!
But what's wrong with having objectives that have words such as appreciate or to know or to understand? The problem is, you don't know whether you've achieved them or not. They're a truly rubbish learning objective. Let's have a think about this in the way of SMART goals. SMART goals allow us to see whether objectives are actually useful. They're meant to be specific, measurable, achievable, realistic and time-bound. And to know, to understand, to appreciate, well, they're none of these. They're not specific, they're not measurable, they're not achievable because you can't measure whether or not this has even happened. The only thing that they are is time-bound, because you know for definite that this lecture is going to finish at some point, so you can get back to your normal life. Even worse, all of these objectives can just be answered with an agreement. I want you to appreciate this. I do. They're lovely. Isn't it a masterpiece? No learning has actually happened. So if our current ones are rubbish, what are we going to do about it? There's 3 steps for you to be able to improve your lesson objectives. There's a quote by Johann Goethe that says, knowing is not enough, we must apply. Now, if you Google it, that's also linked back to Bruce Lee. And if we're honest, I'm not going to argue with him. So instead, we need our learning objectives to have a tendency towards action. Have you ever heard of Bloom's Taxonomy? I know it's another old guy, we'll put some more links to videos about Bloom up here. In a nutshell, he created a hierarchy of learning that moves from knowledge all the way through to evaluation. And we're going to use Bloom's taxonomy to decide how we're going to structure our lesson. Step 1 is to decide what transformation do you actually want to see in your learners. Is this a session where we're just wanting to give knowledge? Is this one where we want them to apply knowledge that they've already learned? Or is this one of those higher level sessions where we're wanting them to compare and contrast and argue the information that they've already got? Because once we know that, we can then start to tailor the session to making sure that that transformation is achieved. So if we go back to our medical school example, rather than we want them to appreciate the heart sounds, actually we want them to know what the heart sounds are when they're examining a patient. Step 2 is objectives before content. So before we've started to decide what information we're going to put into the session, we're going to start writing our objectives first. So now that we know that this is a comprehension task, we're going to use the link in the description below to select one of our keywords. And the keyword we're going to choose is recognise. In this session, we want you to be able to recognise the heart sounds when you're examining a patient. And do you see what you've now done? You've now changed it from a passive teaching session to an active learning session, where by the end we can measure whether or not they can recognise. And that moves us into step 3, which is designing our content based around the objective that we've written. So we want our students to be able to recognise the different heart sounds. So how are we going to do that? Well, the start is that we're going to need to show them what those heart sounds are so that they can recognise them. But then we need some form of active event. We need either a quiz or a test or something that allows them to retrieve the knowledge rather than just having you passing the information in the direction of them. And now our teaching session is better just for those 5 minutes of extra work. So for our next teaching session, we're going to use active words instead. Otherwise, you're arguing with Bruce Lee. Actually, I think he's dead now, so you'll probably win.